This is what we want. Noir City, the sexiest audiences in cinema. It's good. We're going to get you guys in Seattle wearing suits if it's the last thing I do. Somebody asked me, I did this interview last year, and they said, you know, they ask you all the normal questions about film noir and film preservation and all that. And then this guy at the end said, so what would you do with your last $500? It's like, you know, they always ask a question, what do you always have in your refrigerator or something, you know? I say, martini olives, of course, you know? And then, what would you do with your last $500? And I said, I would buy a black suit, right? That's what you do, you know? You get a decent black suit for $500, and I said, because it gets you in everywhere you need to go, and when it's all over, they bury you in it. It's a perfect investment for your last $500. Okay, so tonight is Ladies' Night at Noir City because you're going to see two films featuring probably two of the most famous characters in film noir. And guess who they're named? Laura and Gilda. So you have heard the expression of this movie was a vehicle for someone, okay? Gilda is like the ultimate vehicle. This movie was created specifically for Rita Hayworth. In 1945, I mean, she was becoming a pretty big star. And in 1945 at Columbia Pictures, she did a movie called CoverGirl. And that was a big hit, a musical. She was in that with Gene Kelly. And Harry Cohn, the head of Columbia Pictures, who was absolutely infatuated with Rita Hayworth, decided he had to make like the perfect vehicle for his rising star. And this is it. And this movie is so strange in so many ways. You have heard me get up here and do these introductions and talk about the creativeness of filmmakers in this era and how they had to work around the constraints of the production code. Well, Gilda is a movie that is about nothing other than sex. That's really all this movie is about. I mean, it exists to make a complete sex object out of Rita Hayworth. It's about these unbelievably uncontrollable passions that Johnny Farrell has for Gilda. And there's this character of Balin Munson, the gangster casino owner down there in Buenos Aires, played by the very creepy George McCready. A man of greatly indeterminate sexuality. So somehow they construct this movie out of all of these weird elements. You'll see when the screenwriting credits come up that there's a lot of shared credits in that regard. Even Ben Hecht, uncredited, rumor has it that Ben Hecht was called in at the end to add some of his usual panache to the final screenplay. It's just a very, very weird movie. And it amazes me sometimes that people refer to this as like almost definitive film noir, because it isn't. It isn't even close to being definitive film noir. But it is just an extraordinary document of its time and how it presented sexuality on the screen and managed to do it. Now, I have done these introductions in the past where people have said, you know, don't talk about what you see in the movie and all the sexual symbolism and all that. Let people discover it for themselves. So I'm just going to say that in this movie, a cane isn't necessarily always just a cane. A cigarette isn't always just a cigarette, especially when it's smoked the way Rita Hayworth smokes it. So. And yes, all of that has been verified. I was very good friends with Evelyn Keyes, who was married to Charles Vidor, the man who directed this movie. And we watched this film together one afternoon. And Evelyn just roared through the whole movie at all of the stuff. She said, oh, there's Charles doing his sex thing again. Oh my God. Now watch the way she smokes the cigarette here. Oh my God. You know what that means, don't you? And it was like, wow, this is incredible. That, you know, because the reality is that when these films were made, there were a lot of people involved in the making of these films who totally got what was going on. They were playing with the psyche of the public. They were jamming all of this subversive stuff into the films. And there were people that they were working right beside on the films who did not get it. They did not know actually what was going on. I mean, I have heard Farley Granger talk about making Rope with Jimmy Stewart, and he said Jimmy Stewart didn't even realize that John Dahl and I were gay. Not only didn't he realize we were gay in real life, he didn't realize we were gay in the movie, which is what the whole film is about, right? So yes, all of that stuff does actually appear in a lot of these movies, and I'm telling you that tonight you are seeing two films back to back that contain some of the most sexually subversive material of the 1940s in this genre. So I'm happy to bring that to you tonight. There's really not much more to say. You just have to experience Gilda for what it is, and the last thing I do want to leave you with is, you know, a lot of people think that film noir is a total male-dominated genre. They mistakenly, very often, say it's all about the femme fatale. I disagree, especially with this film. I do not really think that Rita Hayworth is the femme fatale in this film. I don't think that she's leading Glenn Ford to his demise. I think he's a very sick man in this movie who manages to self-destruct perfectly well on his own. And that Gilda is actually sort of the victim in this film, caught between the passions of these two very strange men. The other thing that's worth noting is the person who really brought this whole project together and made it a huge success was the producer, a woman, Virginia Van Up, whom Harry Cohn entrusted with being the executive producer at Columbia Pictures for a stretch during the 1940s. And Virginia Van Up was a very, very significant player in Hollywood at that time, along with another woman over at RKO named Joan Harrison, who was also a very, very successful producer and did a lot of very important work in this genre. So I just want to give that little shout out that a lot of times people don't realize that there was a woman behind the making of Gilda. They always talk about the weirdness of Harry Cohn and his obsession with Rita Hayworth, but it was really Virginia Van Up that guided this picture through to completion and was responsible for it being a huge hit. If you're a young person in the audience tonight, you might not realize how colossal a bombshell Rita Hayworth was in 1946 when this movie came out. She became known as the love goddess in Hollywood, and until Marilyn Monroe came around, Rita Hayworth was it in Hollywood. I mean, she was the hottest thing going, as you'll see when she makes her entrance in this film. So if you haven't seen this movie before, you're really in for a treat. It's totally bizarre, and Rita Hayworth's first appearance will just about melt the screen. So, having said that, enjoy this show, and remember, no cell phones in 1946. So this is your last chance. Turn them off or you will be dealt with severely. Okay, so enjoy the picture, and I hope you're sticking around to watch Laura as the back end of this amazing double bill. Enjoy.